They called you too much, but only because they were too little to meet you where you were. My friends, let's be real for a second. People love to call you too much when they can't handle your depth. They say you're too emotional, too intense, too expressive, because it's easier for them to label your light as a problem than admit their own eyes were never ready for that brightness. They wanted comfort, not connection. And when you gave them something real, it scared the numbness out of them. Hey folks, imagine this. You're a bonfire in the middle of winter, radiant, warm, alive. But the person standing next to you, they've been living in the cold for so long they've mistaken frostbite for comfort. So when they get close to your flame, it doesn't just warm them, it exposes the numbness they've been carrying. And instead of learning how to thaw, they run. They call your fire too hot, your energy too much, and your care overbearing. But the truth? They weren't built for that level of warmth. You see, in this world, being too much just means you were never meant for people who run from realness. We live in a generation obsessed with low effort, with I don't care energy, where detachment is mistaken for strength. Folks call it peace, but most of the time, it's just fear hiding behind a calm face. Real peace doesn't come from running from connection. It comes from standing still in it, from being brave enough to feel. And that's what you did. You felt everything. You gave everything. And they mistook your openness for chaos, when really it was courage. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, you did that. You were the good one. You showed up when they withdrew. You spoke truth when they stayed silent. You loved even when love was not returned." And maybe that scared them, because love like yours demands accountability. It forces people to confront themselves, and when they weren't ready to meet their reflection, they blamed the mirror. You. But here's the plot twist. They thought walking away from you meant peace. What they didn't know is that silence has a way of speaking louder than words ever could. And now, in that silence, they're hearing everything you once tried to say. Every ignored message, every unappreciated moment, every quiet act of love they brushed off like it meant nothing. My friend, you weren't too emotional. You were emotionally fluent in a world where people can barely speak their truth. You weren't too intense. You were passionate in a world that glorifies numbness. And you weren't too much. You were the whole damn thing. They just showed up empty-handed. So when they said you were too much, remember? That's the language of limitation. It's what small souls say when they meet a vast one. Let them drown in the silence you left. Not out of cruelty, but out of consequence, because your absence isn't punishment. It's the natural result of someone mishandling something sacred. So stand tall, my friends. Your emotions are not a flaw. They're evidence that you felt deeply in a shallow world. And that's something rare, something powerful, something worth protecting. Write this in the comments to remind yourself and every soul watching beside you. I was never too much. And if this message hit home, press that like button, subscribe, and stay with me. Because what comes next will show you exactly why your silence became their storm. Number 1. Too much was just more than they could handle. They said you were too much because they couldn't handle the parts of you that made them feel small. You see, my friends, people like to shrink what they don't understand. When you show up with real emotion, with honesty, with passion, they don't see depth, they see danger. They think, if I stand too close to this fire, I'll burn. But the truth, you were never the fire that destroyed. You were the light that revealed, and that's what scared them. Because when someone lives in emotional darkness for too long, even kindness feels like interrogation. Imagine this. You're standing in front of a mirror holding a torch. The flame is your truth, but the person next to you has spent their life hiding from reflection. So when that light hits their face, they flinch. They cover their eyes, not because you hurt them, but because they see what they've been running from. Their own emptiness, their own walls, their own lack of depth. That's what happens when someone calls you too much. They're not describing you, they're confessing themselves. And yet, you start to believe it, don't you? You wonder, am I really too emotional, too deep, too invested? You start dimming your light, watering down your words, pretending not to care. But let's be real. Pretending not to care is exhausting for a heart that was built to love loudly. You can't turn passion into quiet compliance. You can't cage the ocean and call it balance. You weren't meant to be half present or half alive. You were meant to be the full storm, the kind that shakes everything fake loose. But they couldn't stand the storm, because storms test foundations, and theirs wasn't built to last. They wanted connection without confrontation, love without vulnerability, comfort without growth. They wanted all the rewards of depth without the responsibility of honesty. So they blamed you. They told themselves you were overwhelming, dramatic, needy, just to avoid admitting that your presence exposed the emotional poverty inside them. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." So let's break this lie. You were never too much. You were too real for people still addicted to the illusion of control. You were too honest for people who hide behind half feelings. You were too awake for those who find comfort in emotional sleep. And you know what's even more ironic? The very things they criticized you for, the intensity, the empathy, the way you loved, those are the same things they'll start to crave once your silence hits. Because here's the thing about silence. It doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you stopped explaining your worth to people committed to misunderstanding it. They'll sit in that silence thinking they found peace, but what they'll really find is emptiness. The same emptiness they tried to project onto you. They'll realize the world feels dull without your energy, without your emotional gravity. Because you didn't just talk, you brought presence. You didn't just feel, you made them feel too. And once that's gone, once the energy shifts, the quiet becomes haunting. You ever notice how silence grows louder when there's no one left to fill it? That's what they face now. The echoes of your too much replaying in their mind, every message they ignored, every truth they deflected, every time they chose comfort over connection. It's poetic justice, really. The noise they accused you of making turns into the very quiet that keeps them up at night. But let's also be honest with ourselves. It's not easy to be that person, to be the one who feels everything in a world that rewards numbness. It's heavy, it's lonely, it's confusing. You wonder why you care so deeply when others treat caring like a weakness. You question your worth because they made you think emotional clarity was unstable. But my friend, emotional depth is not a curse. It's your superpower. The world tries to shame people who feel deeply because it's easier to live on autopilot. But the ones who feel everything, they're the ones who truly live. So rise from that guilt. Stop apologizing for being real in a world that runs on performance. The problem was never that you were too much. It's that they were too comfortable being less. You were built for connection, not confusion. For love that breathes, not love that hides. And maybe they couldn't handle that, but that's not your burden to carry anymore. Write this in the comments right now if this hits your soul. My depth is my power. Show them, show yourself, show the world around you that being too much only feels wrong when you're surrounded by people who've settled for barely enough. Stay with me, because what's coming next will show you exactly what happens when that same silence you gave them becomes the mirror they can't escape. Number 2, the psychology of overstimulation and withdrawal. They didn't pull away because you were too much. They pulled away because you made them feel more than they knew how to handle. My friends, have you ever noticed how people crave connection until it actually arrives? They'll talk about wanting someone real, someone who listens, who understands, who stays. But when they finally meet that energy, it overwhelms them. They mistake the very thing they asked for as pressure. They start to feel overstimulated, emotionally exposed, almost like your presence breaks their internal rhythm. And that's exactly what happens when someone emotionally unready meets someone emotionally aware. They don't drown because you're too deep. They panic because they never learned to swim. Imagine this. You walk into a quiet room after years of noise. At first, the silence feels strange, even uncomfortable. But soon, you start hearing things you never noticed before. The sound of your own breathing, your own thoughts, the truth sitting quietly in the corner. That's what being around your energy felt like for them. You didn't just bring love, you brought awareness. You didn't just offer comfort, you invited reflection. And to someone who's been avoiding their inner world, that's terrifying. Their nervous system wasn't wired for safety, it was wired for survival, and survival doesn't understand peace. So when you show up calm, consistent, emotionally present, their body read it as danger. It's strange, right, that love could feel threatening. But when someone grows up equating chaos with connection, safety feels foreign. To them, your warmth felt like exposure. Your honesty felt like interrogation. Your availability felt like pressure. They weren't ready to be seen that clearly, so they did what they've always done. They ran. You see, folks, people who haven't done the inner work often confuse stimulation for chemistry. They confuse avoidance for independence. They chase excitement because excitement distracts them from what's underneath, the quiet ache of unhealed wounds. So when you offered stability, when you offered emotional depth, it didn't match their template of love. They didn't know what to do with something that didn't hurt. That's why they called you intense, or said they needed space, or claimed they weren't ready. Because truthfully, they weren't ready to meet themselves through you. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And their reaction to you was never really about you. It was about what your presence triggered inside of them. Your consistency reminded them of every moment they were abandoned. Your affection reminded them of everything they thought they didn't deserve. Your openness reminded them of how long they've been hiding behind detachment. They weren't rejecting you, they were rejecting the mirror you unknowingly held up to their soul. And yet, it's hard for you, isn't it? Because you start thinking, maybe I really was too much. Maybe if I'd been quieter, more patient, less expressive, they would have stayed. But my friends, hear this clearly. You can't dim your truth to make someone comfortable in their avoidance. Their discomfort wasn't your fault. It was their opportunity. You offered them emotional oxygen, and instead of breathing, they held their breath. Not because you were suffocating them, but because peace requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires trust. Two things they never learned to sustain. Here's the paradox. When they pulled away, they felt temporary relief, like they'd escaped intensity. But that relief is short-lived, because intensity isn't always conflict, it's clarity. You didn't bring chaos into their life. You brought focus. You showed them how dull their emotional world had become. And now that you're gone, the same silence they thought they wanted is starting to feel suffocating. The space they once begged for now echoes with everything they ran from. They thought avoiding depth would keep them safe. But avoidance doesn't protect. It delays pain until it grows unbearable. And when the noise of distraction fades, they start to feel the truth crawling back. They remember your energy, not just the words you said, but the way you made them feel grounded. They start to miss that strange calm that used to make them uncomfortable. They start to long for the connection they once mislabeled as intensity. That's the irony of the avoidant mind. They crave what they fear and fear what they crave. But let's talk about you, the one who feels everything. You tried to meet them halfway, didn't you? You tried to soften, to be patient, to understand their silence. But you can't build connection alone. You can't be the only one translating emotions in a language they refuse to learn. So you pulled back, not out of spite, but out of survival. And in that silence, you reclaimed something powerful, your peace. Because here's the hard truth. Real peace doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop apologizing for it. It means you stop mistaking your depth for a flaw. You stop chasing people who see your care as inconvenience. You stop begging for someone to value what they keep discarding. And that's when everything shifts. Because your energy, your empathy, your depth, it's not a curse. It's your power. You were never too much. You were emotionally alive in a world that rewards emotional deadness. You were the reminder that love doesn't have to be cold, to be calm, or distant to be safe. You were the proof that real connection isn't a trap, it's freedom. And maybe they couldn't handle that truth then, but silence has a strange way of teaching the lessons that words never could. So when you catch yourself wondering why they pulled away, remember this: they weren't escaping you. They were escaping their own reflection. You just happened to be the mirror clear enough to show it. Write this in the comments and mean it this time. My calm is power. Show them, show yourself, and show the world around you that silence isn't weakness. It's wisdom in motion. Stay with me, because next we're going to talk about what happens when that same silence you gave them starts echoing louder than their comfort zone could ever handle. Number 3. Silence as the great equalizer. They once said you were too loud with your love. Now the silence you left speaks louder than anything you ever said. You know, my friends, silence is one of the most underestimated forms of power. People think silence means weakness. They think if you're quiet, you're broken, defeated, or done. But silence, when it comes from someone who once gave everything, isn't surrender. It's strategy. It's a recalibration of energy. It's the moment the storm stops roaring, not because it ran out of power, but because it finally realized the thunder doesn't need to explain itself to those who fear the rain. When you stopped reaching out, when you stopped explaining yourself, when you stopped defending your emotions, something shifted. They felt it. They might not admit it, but deep down, they felt the air change. You know that kind of silence that lingers, that gets under your skin and starts to whisper the truth you tried to avoid hearing. That's what your silence became for them. It wasn't emptiness. It was a mirror that reflected everything they refused to see when you were still speaking. See, while you were giving, they were comfortable. Your messages, your efforts, your compassion, they were all cushions, safety nets, the background music to their chaos. They didn't have to think about losing you because your energy was always there, steady, loyal, waiting. But the moment you went quiet, the background went dead. The music stopped, and suddenly they realized they were standing alone in the noise of their own mind. That's what silence does. It equalizes power. It forces reflection. It exposes imbalance. When one person is always giving and the other is always taking, silence restores gravity. It reminds them that your voice wasn't just noise, it was their comfort. Your attention wasn't just affection, it was structure. Without it, their emotional architecture starts to crumble. Imagine it like this: a room once filled with light, laughter, warmth, and then, one day, all the lights go out. The person who once complained the room was too bright suddenly can't see. They bump into walls. They reach for familiar things that aren't there anymore. That's what they're going through now. Your silence is the darkness that exposes their dependency. It reveals just how much of their peace was borrowed from your presence. And that's the part they never saw coming. They thought distance would give them control. They thought silence would protect them. But silence doesn't belong to the one who runs. It belongs to the one who chooses it. You didn't disappear because you lost interest. You disappeared because you outgrew chaos disguised as connection. And now they're left alone with the very thing they feared most, their own mind. The thoughts they drowned out with distraction, the guilt they buried under pride, the regret that creeps in when there's no one left to blame. That's the paradox of the avoidant heart. They crave freedom but hate loneliness. They want peace but fear stillness. They seek love but resist vulnerability. And your silence made them face all three at once. They'll start replaying moments in their head, the last conversation, the tone in your voice, the look in your eyes before you finally walked away. They'll scroll through your messages, not to reply, but to feel something. Because your words, your warmth, your energy, they linger. They don't vanish when you go silent. They echo, they haunt. And the longer your silence lasts, the louder those echoes get. Let's be real, folks. It hurts at first, doesn't it? Going silent isn't easy when you're someone who feels deeply. There's a part of you that wants to break it, that wants to reach out just to make the tension stop. You start to question yourself. What if they don't care? What if they never realize what they lost? But here's the truth. Silence isn't about getting them to realize anything. It's about realizing yourself. It's about remembering that peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being unbothered. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." And that's exactly what silence is. Bravery. The courage to stop performing for people who never clapped. The courage to let someone sit with the absence they created. The courage to value your peace more than your need for closure. Silence is the space where dignity lives. It's where you reclaim all the energy you wasted trying to explain what was never your fault. Now they're learning what your presence truly meant. They're realizing silence isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of consequence. Every time they reach for their phone and stop themselves, every time they feel that sudden ache of missing you, every time they wonder if you've moved on, that's silence doing its work. That's karma in slow motion. The lesson they avoided in your words has now taken form in your absence. And here's the beautiful part. Silence changes you too. It teaches you that not every storm deserves your thunder. It reminds you that calm isn't boring. It's powerful. That detachment isn't cold. It's controlled. You learn that when you stop chasing peace, peace starts chasing you. And in that stillness, you begin to see just how much power you had all along. So don't mistake silence for weakness, my friends. It's not you giving up. It's you leveling up. You're not being passive, you're being precise. You're showing the world that the loudest strength is the kind that doesn't need to shout. Write this in the comments if you feel it in your bones. My silence speaks truth. Show them. Show yourself, show the world around you, that the quiet you created isn't emptiness, it's equilibrium. Stay with me, because next we're going to dive into what happens when that silence starts cracking their illusion of control, and the same freedom they chased becomes the cage they can't escape. Number 4, the collapse of the illusion of control. They thought they had control when they walked away, but control built on ego always collapses under silence. You see, my friends, people who live in emotional avoidance have one obsession: control. It's their safety net, their armor, their illusion of power. They need to believe they're the ones calling the shots because deep down, they've always been terrified of losing them. Control is how they avoid vulnerability. It's how they protect themselves from feeling powerless. So when they left you, when they distanced themselves, when they decided they were better off without you. It wasn't about clarity, it was about control. They wanted to feel like they were winning the emotional game. But silence, your silence, has a way of turning that illusion inside out. At first, they convince themselves that pulling away gives them peace, that having space is freedom, that not having to explain, not having to engage, means they're back in charge of their emotions. But here's what they didn't expect. Silence doesn't stay empty for long. Silence fills up with truth. It starts whispering things they've been avoiding for years. The very control they thought they had starts slipping, not because of you, but because of the void they created. Imagine a juggler trying to keep 10 glass balls in the air. That's what control feels like for them. Constant motion, constant distraction, constant pretense. But the moment you stop participating in the performance, one ball drops. Then another, then another. And before they know it, they're standing in the middle of their own mess, surrounded by shattered pieces of the illusion they once called power. That's the collapse. The moment when the realization hits, control without connection isn't control. It's emptiness dressed as independence. They thought they could dictate the rhythm, that they could control when to pull close and when to pull away. They loved the push-pull dynamic because it made them feel safe. It made them feel desired without being vulnerable. As long as you were still trying, still explaining, still chasing, they felt superior. They had power because your attention was their mirror. But when you stopped, when you went silent, that mirror shattered, and with it, their false sense of dominance disappeared. Now they're left with something they can't manipulate: uncertainty. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know what you're feeling. They don't know if you've moved on, if you miss them, or if you've forgotten them entirely. And that uncertainty drives them mad. Because people addicted to control aren't afraid of losing others. They're afraid of losing influence. And silence removes their influence completely. It leaves them powerless in the only way that matters, emotionally. They'll try to reframe it. They'll say they don't care. They'll post things, do things, act unbothered. But you can always tell when control is slipping, because arrogance turns into anxiety, pride turns into paranoia, and stillness becomes unbearable. They'll start overthinking the moments they dismissed, the texts they ignored, the conversations they cut short. They'll replay scenes in their head trying to understand when exactly they lost the upper hand. But here's the truth. They never had it. You were never under their control. They just mistook your loyalty for dependence. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That's exactly what you did. You stopped trying to control what wasn't yours, and in doing so, you reclaimed everything that was: your peace, your focus, your emotional balance. You turned what they saw as weakness, your silence, into a weapon of truth, and that truth exposed their illusion. Because the second you detached, they realized something they weren't prepared to face. You were the one holding the emotional balance all along. When you were present, they felt grounded. When you left, they felt lost. That's not control. That's dependency masquerading as dominance. They thought they were walking away from emotional chaos, but what they really walked away from was emotional stability. Yours. The energy that made them feel alive, the attention that made them feel significant, the validation that made them feel seen. It was never theirs. It was borrowed from you. And once you took it back, they were left with the silence of their own emptiness. You see, my friends, the human mind is funny. It craves control, but it's built for connection. You can't detach from your nature. You can suppress it, delay it, numb it, but eventually the truth resurfaces. And that's when the collapse begins. The illusion of control can't survive in isolation. It feeds on attention. Without it, it starves. And that's what's happening to them right now. Every moment you stay silent, their illusion loses oxygen. Every second you remain calm, their ego loses footing. Until finally, what's left is the truth they never wanted to see. That control was never peace. It was scary with good marketing. And here's the best part. You didn't have to say a word. You didn't have to prove anything. Your absence became your statement. Your peace became your boundary. And your silence became their teacher. Because when someone's world depends on controlling another, your withdrawal doesn't just confuse them, it unravels them. So if you've ever doubted whether walking away was the right choice, let me make it simple. You didn't walk away to win, you walked away to heal. And in doing so, you allowed the illusion to collapse under its own weight. Because real power doesn't come from control. It comes from clarity. Write this in the comments, my friends. My silence broke their control. Show them, show yourself, show the world around you that when you stop reacting, you start ruling. Stay with me, because next, we'll talk about what happens after that illusion collapses, when the silence you left behind starts whispering regret in the very ears that once ignored your truth. Number 5. When regret starts whispering. Regret doesn't always arrive with tears and confessions. Sometimes it slips in quietly, disguised as insomnia, memories and questions that never stop echoing. You see, my friends, the moment regret begins to whisper, it's not loud, it's subtle. It creeps in during the quiet hours, when the distractions have faded, when no one's around to validate their version of events. That's when it happens. That's when they start to feel the weight of everything they threw away. They don't even call it regret at first. They'll say they're just thinking. They'll convince themselves they're only curious about how you're doing. But we both know what it is. It's regret trying to wear pride like a mask. In the beginning, they feel powerful. They feel relieved. They tell themselves walking away was the right decision. They even feel lighter for a while. But here's the truth. Relief after detachment isn't always freedom. Sometimes it's shocking. It's the calm before realization. It's the silence before the storm. And when that silence stretches long enough, when it stops feeling peaceful and starts feeling hollow, the mind begins to wander back to what it abandoned. And that's where the whispers begin. They start remembering small things first. The way you used to say their name. The sound of your voice when you were calm. The way you noticed things others never did. Those details don't seem important at first, but the mind has a cruel way of turning nostalgia into self-reflection. Suddenly, the memories aren't about you, they're about them, about who they were when they were with you, about how your presence made them feel something they can't seem to find anywhere else. And that's when confusion sets in, because regret isn't just missing you, it's realizing they lost themselves when they lost you. Picture this, folks. Imagine them scrolling through old messages one night. Not to reply, not to rekindle anything, just to feel something familiar. They read your words and realize how steady you were, how patient, how giving, and in that moment, they're faced with a truth they tried so hard to deny. You were not too much. They were too guarded. You were not clingy. They were disconnected. You were not dramatic. You were expressive. Every label they used to push you away starts to sound hollow in hindsight, because now, with distance, they can finally see what their defense mechanisms cost them: peace. That's how regret works. It doesn't slam into them all at once. It drips, slowly, like water finding cracks in stone. It wears down their certainty. It blurs the lines between confidence and carelessness. They start wondering, did I make a mistake? They start asking questions they once avoided. Were they really too much, or was I too afraid? Did I reject them, or did I reject the version of me that finally felt seen? And that's where the torment begins. Because regret is the emotional consequence of avoidance. It's the price you pay for mistaking fear for freedom. They didn't want to be vulnerable, so they built walls. But now, those same walls have turned into a prison. They can't feel what they used to. They can't connect the same way. Because every time someone new tries to get close, they compare it to you. They remember the way you made connection look effortless. They remember how your emotional honesty made their guardedness look small. And no matter how many people they meet, no matter how many distractions they chase, no one replicates that energy. Because authenticity isn't replaceable, it's haunting. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And right now, their thoughts are soaked in you. They might try to ignore it, but memory doesn't need permission to return. It just does. Every time they see something that reminds them of you, every time they hear a song that used to play when you were around, every time they find themselves laughing at something and then realize they wish you were there to hear it, regret tightens its grip. But here's where it gets deep. Regret doesn't just haunt them because they miss you. It haunts them because they miss the version of themselves they were with you, the one that laughed more, the one that opened up, even if only for a little while, the one that felt safe enough to be real. You were a glimpse into what emotional maturity could look like, but they weren't ready to live there. And now that glimpse feels like a loss. You see, folks, people don't usually regret the breakup. They regret what the relationship revealed about them. They regret not being ready when someone showed up with something real. They regret choosing distance over growth, because love that challenges you doesn't disappear, it echoes. It's not the kind of thing you can silence. You can move cities, change jobs, meet new people, but that kind of emotional imprint stays. It lingers, and the longer your silence stretches, the more that regret begins to sound like realization. They'll try to distract themselves. They'll fill their days with noise, with new faces, with shallow thrills. But at night, when everything slows down, that quiet starts to feel like punishment. Because silence has no mercy. It plays back every truth you once tried to tell them. The very things they called too emotional or too deep now sound like wisdom they wish they had listened to. And here's the part I want you to hold on to. You don't need to break your silence for them to learn the lesson. The universe does that for you. Time has a way of translating what words couldn't. Your absence becomes their teacher, your peace becomes their consequence, and their regret becomes your closure. So don't look back. Don't question your worth just because someone couldn't receive your love. Regret is their awakening, not your responsibility. You already did your part. You showed up with authenticity in a world terrified of it, and that's something to be proud of. Write this in the comments right now if you feel it in your bones. They'll remember my peace. Show them, show yourself, show the world around you that regret doesn't mean they suddenly deserve a place back in your life. It means life finally showed them the truth you always carried. Stay with me, because what comes next will show you how your silence, your beautiful, powerful, stoic silence, becomes the mirror that finally makes them confront the emptiness they once mistook for freedom. Number 6. The power of your absence. Your absence will speak the truth. Your presence was too kind to say. You know, my friends, it's easy to underestimate how powerful your absence truly is, until you watch what it does to the people who once took you for granted. They thought your silence was a void, but what they didn't realize was that your absence carries weight. It carries memory. It carries consequences. You see, when someone loses a presence like yours, they don't just lose a person. They lose a mirror, a rhythm, a source of grounding they didn't even know they depended on. At first, they won't admit it. They'll convince themselves they're fine. They'll fill the silence with noise, with distractions, with anything that numbs the ache of missing what they dismissed. They'll scroll, they'll post, they'll perform strength for an audience that isn't watching. But deep down, when the lights go off and the noise fades, the absence begins to whisper, not with words, but with feeling. Because absence doesn't beg to be noticed, it forces it. Imagine this: a house that used to be filled with music suddenly goes quiet. The same walls that once absorbed laughter now echo with emptiness. The same couch where you both once sat now feels too big, too cold. That's the kind of silence your absence creates. It's not just quiet, it's hollow. And in that hollow space, something starts to happen. Their emotional armor begins to crack, because your absence doesn't just remove you, it removes the illusion they built around you. When you were there, they could project, they could deflect, they could control the narrative, they could pretend they were fine because you were still accessible, still available, still within reach. But once you left, once you pulled back for real, all their emotional defense systems lost their target. There's no one left to blame, no one left to test, no one left to reassure them that they're still significant. And that's when the mirror appears. Your absence becomes that mirror, one that reflects every part of themselves they tried to avoid seeing. They see the emotional immaturity. They see the way they sabotaged stability. They see how they mistook your patience for permanence. Because the truth is, your energy had become their emotional structure. You were the grounding cord that kept their chaos balanced. You were the warmth that made their coldness seem tolerable. You were the emotional translator that made their silence understandable. And now that you're gone, they have to face what life feels like without that balance. Seneca once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." That's what they're realizing now. They wasted time trying to protect themselves from feeling too much, and in doing so, they missed the rare chance to feel something real. Because love, real love, isn't something you protect yourself from. It's something you grow through. But they weren't ready to grow. They were only ready to control. And control dies the moment you stop feeding it attention. Your absence did what your presence couldn't. It made them listen. It stripped away their illusions. It showed them that silence isn't peace. It's the echo of everything they refused to face. And now, every quiet moment becomes a replay. The way you looked at them when you cared, the sound of your laughter, the way your energy filled the room without saying a word. It all returns, not to haunt them, but to humble them. The thing about emotionally detached people is they think distance will protect them. But distance doesn't protect. It exposes. It reveals how emotionally dependent they actually were on the very connection they claimed to reject. And that's the paradox. They didn't realize that by leaving you, they'd end up losing themselves, because your energy was a mirror to their higher potential. You showed them who they could be if they stopped hiding. You made them feel safe enough to be seen. That's what they miss now. Not just you, but the version of themselves that only existed in your presence. But let's turn the focus back to you for a moment, because your absence doesn't just transform them, it transforms you too. There's something deeply sacred about choosing silence after being misunderstood, about walking away without anger, about letting your absence say what words never could. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. It's you stepping out of emotional warfare and stepping into peace. It's you saying, "I don't need to prove what only time can teach." And here's what's beautiful. When your absence carries grace instead of bitterness, it becomes unforgettable. Because people can forget what you said, but they'll never forget how your presence made them feel, and how your absence made them realize it. You left a mark, not a scar, a lesson. You became the voice in their head that whispers, "This is what you lose when you take love for granted." so don't underestimate it. Your absence has power that no argument, no explanation, no closure could ever match. It's poetic justice, it's karmic balance. It's the universe showing that silence doesn't mean indifference, it means mastery. You've outgrown their chaos, you've graduated from their confusion, and now you're living proof that peace is louder than any apology they could ever offer. My friends, write this in the comments to remind yourself and everyone who needs to hear it. My absence speaks power. Show them, show yourself, show the world around you that you don't have to raise your voice to make your truth heard. The silence you left behind already says everything. Stay with me, because next we're going to step into something deeper. The realization that your emotional depth, the very thing they ran from, was never a weakness. It was the rarest form of strength they'll ever encounter. Number 7. Your emotional depth was never a weakness. The world told you to be less. But the truth is, your depth terrified people who only knew how to live on the surface. My friends, let's talk about something the world rarely admits. Depth scares people. They'll praise authenticity until it asks them to show up honestly. They'll say they want connection until they meet someone who actually gives it. They'll say they want love, but what they really want is comfort without confrontation, affection without accountability. So when they met you, someone real, raw, emotionally awake, it was like standing at the edge of an ocean after spending years in puddles. They loved the reflection on the surface, but when they realized how deep it went, they panicked. You see, your emotions were never a burden, they were a bridge. You built connection out of honesty, out of vulnerability, out of a willingness to be seen as you are. That's courage. And it takes far more strength to open your heart than it does to hide behind walls of indifference. The problem isn't that you felt too much, it's that they felt too little. And when someone like you walks into their life, it exposes every part of themselves they've neglected. Your emotional depth didn't scare them because it was wrong, it scared them because it was real. Imagine it like this. You're a full symphony in a world that's only used to background noise. They liked the melody, but when they realized there were layers, meaning, emotion, they didn't know how to listen anymore. They called it overwhelming, not because the music was wrong, but because they'd spent their lives tuning out. But here's the truth. Silence doesn't make them strong. It just makes them impractical. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And your thoughts, my friends, were rich, textured, alive. You didn't just love. You thought about what love meant. You didn't just care. You reflected on why people hurt. You didn't just feel. You understood. That's not a weakness. That's wisdom wrapped in empathy. It's what philosophers and poets have spent centuries trying to express. The ability to feel deeply without losing yourself. But here's the thing, when you're built like that, the world will test you. It'll call your strength softness. It'll call your empathy naive. It'll make you question why you care so much in a culture that glorifies apathy. But don't let it make you smaller. Don't shrink your heart to fit inside the comfort zones of people who fear emotional gravity. You weren't made to blend in with the detached. You were made to awaken them, to challenge them, to remind them that feeling deeply is not something to escape, it's something to honor. Because one day, those same people who told you you're too much will crave what you gave effortlessly. They'll chase it in others. They'll look for your emotional clarity in fragments, hoping someone else will bring what you once offered in abundance. But they won't find it, because you can't replace presence, you can't copy authenticity, you can't replicate energy that was rooted in truth. Your emotional depth becomes the yardstick they measure everyone else against, even if they'll never admit it out loud. Let's break one more lie before we close. Being emotionally deep doesn't make you broken. It makes you brave. You've walked through your own storms, faced your own fears, and still found the courage to love. That's strength most people can't comprehend. You've turned pain into perspective, rejection into redirection, silence into strength. You've learned that self-worth isn't found in who stays. It's found in how you heal when they leave. And here's what's poetic. Your silence didn't make you colder. It made you clearer. You no longer chase people who can't meet you halfway. You no longer explain feelings to those who've already decided not to understand them. You've become what Stoicism truly teaches. Calm doesn't mean you don't care. It means you've mastered where to place your care. So when they look back, and they will, they won't miss the version of you that begged to be seen. They'll miss the version that saw them, that understood them, that stayed when no one else did. And that's the kind of absence they'll never recover from. Because emotional depth, once experienced, becomes unforgettable. My friends, write this in the comments right now. My depth is divine. Show them, show yourself, show the world around you. That feeling deeply in an unfeeling world is not your downfall. It's your distinction, because you weren't too much, you were too real. And if this message spoke to your soul, if you felt something stir in your chest as you listened, don't forget to press that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to remember their power. Stay grounded, stay graceful, and remember, your silence is still speaking, and the world is finally starting to listen.